Hello and welcome to the DDW In Conversation With series, where I speak with members of the drug discovery industry about their work and how it helps turn science into business. I'm Megan Thomas, Multimedia Editor at DDW. Today, I'm in conversation with Nick Slack, Chairman and CEO of the START Centre for Cancer Research. Thank you for joining me, Nick. Since taking the helm at START in April 2024, you've overseen rapid expansion across the US and Europe. Does this strategy reflect the evolving global needs in early phase oncology trials?
Megan, first, thank you for having me. It's definitely a pleasure to speak with you today and to represent START. We're very proud of the organization. It's a very mission-driven organization. START was founded nearly 20 years ago, 18 years ago to be exact. We talk a lot about START being an investigator-led organization, and that really speaks to our roots and our history. The organization was founded by some very pioneering cancer researchers who were operating in an academic setting in the United States and in South Texas, actually, many years ago. And they had the insight and I would say the foresight of looking ahead and saying, there has to be a better way to bring novel therapeutics and cutting edge early phase oncology trials to more patients in the community setting. And so they left academia. They joined an oncology practice group in San Antonio called South Texas Oncology and Hematology. Many of those co-founding investigators are still with us today. And they set about to create really the first early phase oncology trial clinic that was operating in the community setting. That clinic 18 years ago was our first. And today we have 10 clinics open around the world, 6 of which are in Europe, 4 of which are in the United States. And by the end of the year, we'll be 14 clinics. We recently announced an exciting, and we think it's going to be a transformational partnership with a leading oncology practice management organization called OneOncology operating in the US. And with that partnership announcement, we also are opening 3 new START clinics at 3 OneOncology practice groups, one in Los Angeles, one in Dallas-Fort Worth, and another in New Jersey. These are 3 of the largest oncology practices in the world, serving a very large patient population already and operating in very large and diverse metropolitan areas. We have 720 trials active, which makes us, if not the largest, one of the largest early phase oncology trial organizations and clinic organizations in the world. We have the good fortune to have 31 world-class leading early phase oncology investigators. We have thousands of patients that we serve that are active in clinical trials. And I would say, the future is very bright. Our mission is what we call hope through access, where we provide hope for patients in the form of an early phase oncology trial by providing access points in clinics around the world where those patients may not have had access to trials were it not for START. And speaking to the expanding footprint, and is this reflective of the needs in cancer trials writ large and in early phase oncology in particular, the answer is unanimously and resoundingly yes. If you look at data over the last 10 or 15 years, you see a dramatic increase in the number of cancer trials. Today, cancer trials are about half of all clinical trials. In early phase oncology is actually the fastest growing segment of all clinical trials across all therapeutic areas and all phases. New clinical trials in that segment grow at about a 10% clip year over year, compared to a 2 to 3% trial growth rate in other therapeutic areas and other phases. There is a very problematic have and have not access issue that we are seeking to address. It's increasingly striking in the US, where 80% of cancer patients are treated in community hospitals or oncology practice groups, but only have access to about 10 to 20% of the clinical trials. Meanwhile, the reverse is true. The academic centers, they see about 20% of the cancer population, but about 80% of the trials. And with the increase in volume and the growth rates in cancer trials, more infrastructure is needed to not only bring trials to these patients in need, and to help their physicians expand the menu of options that are available to those patients when they need a trial. But much more than that, if we don't have the infrastructure, cancer drug development will continue to stall and drag, and timelines will elongate, and good molecules won't reach patients as quickly as they could. So building the expansion is imperative for us. It's imperative for our mission, and it's also imperative for the enterprise of drug development. If you take that one step further, and at least in the US, you look at the budgetary pressures that are now occurring with NIH spending and National Cancer Institute spending, a lot of those funds go to the academic medical centers. They're rather inefficient in the first instance, and we believe that these will create new pressures on those centers and create confounding or compounding capacity issues. And so again, I think it is imperative for us and for the enterprise of cancer drug development to have an infrastructure that helps many stakeholders, the patients, physicians, and the drug developers. Access takes many forms, one of which is what we do every day in opening clinics. We actually build early phase oncology trial units inside of practices and hospitals around the world. We have START dedicated treatment centers or treatment rooms where we run the trials and we dose patients, infuse patients, dedicated pharmacy, PK labs, all of the staff we employ, all of the process we bring in, all of the technology we bring in. Critically, we bring in all of the sponsor and CRO relationships. We serve those physicians in those locations. We've also recently announced that we launched what we call our Hope Hub, which is an online resource for physicians and their patients, not only to gain informational access to START and the trials that we have, but also just about clinical trials in cancer kind of across the board. And we built a whole team of people to help coordinate with physicians and patients who are looking for trial options. So all of this infrastructure is mission critical to helping patients find trials, helping physicians find trials, connecting with our team of investigators, and it all goes for the good of enhancing drug development infrastructure so that more patients and communities can be reached.
So my next question is, can you share some of the recent advances in your preclinical modeling capabilities and how these are influencing trial design or candidate selection?
I'm really glad that you asked that question. It's interesting to note that on one hand, we're among the largest early phase clinical trial organizations in the world in cancer. And on the other hand, we have this really robust preclinical capability. You put those two things together and you're really addressing what we see as translational gap in drug development, the translation from preclinical animal testing into the clinic and first in human, where we do a great deal of work in both. And so we're really the only group that has that capability of preclinical into the clinic. With our expansion of clinics, what that allows us to do in our preclinical organization is those become access points for tissue, for tumor tissue. And we grow that tissue into patient-derived xenotransplant tumor models, which we embed in mice. And then we sequence all of those models. We genetically sequence them, we characterize them, we annotate them so that without identifying patients, we do have pretty exhaustive profiles of that particular patient situation. We database all of those models, we catalog them, we make a lot of information available to drug developers, and these models become very, very precise. What we are able to do then is make those models available to them and then allow them to run their preclinical trials with us. There's a long history of data, and it's not a perfect science, but it is highly predictive of showing tumor response in those models, especially if the model quality is high and good, and we believe that it is. And the idea is to shepherd a molecule from the preclinical setting into the clinical setting, thereby compressing timelines on one hand. Cancer drug development and science is so interesting for so many reasons. Among them, is the constant adaptation of tumors and how they evolve and adapt and try to escape the drugs. And so increasingly, what we do is we train those models to become drug resistant. And by training the models to become drug resistant, it helps the drug developers earlier on think about how that drug may be rendered ineffective in the face of tumors and cancer that are evolving very, very rapidly. And so the other thing I would mention, we also have a very keen focus on therapeutic expansion. So if you look at, genitourinary GU oncology, for example, we made an acquisition of the largest clinical trial by volume clinic in the world in April. That's Carolina Urologic Research Center, which we now call Start Carolinas. They're attached to a urology practice. There are 2.5 million cases of GU cancers annually. So, and against a backdrop of 20 million or so new cancer cases, pretty significant number. Those prostate, bladder, and renal models are hard to come by, but we're going to increase our footprint with more urology practices. And when we do that, we'll be able to derive more tumor models. And so the whole idea is really this compression of preclinical into clinical from a timing standpoint, while also increasing scientific rigor and giving more predictability to the drug developers. Because as you know, drug development has about a 95% failure rate. And so anything that we can do to shrink the time and also to offer more predictive capability about how those molecules may respond, very important for us. And it all kind of is rooted in the same thing. And that's the mission, focus on the patient.
Given the global reach of START, and you've mentioned how many different facets and elements are taking place at any given time at the organization, how do you ensure harmonization of scientific standards and operational consistency across such a geographically diverse early phase trial network, particularly given the varying regulatory landscapes?
I would characterize it as one of the most essential things that we do. If you think about the weight of responsibility that we have in caring for patients and placing them in clinical trials with novel agents for the very first time, and often these patients are and their families are in quite desperate situations, and their physicians are looking for options where doors were closed previously. The highest standards of excellence in patient safety and care and quality are critical. Every clinic, for the most part, there are some nuances, and you called out one of them, like the regulatory structures, and I'll talk about that more specifically. But our clinics operate the same way. They're all on the same standard operating procedures. We're on one technology platform. Our people are trained the same way. We have a rigorous training program. We have a rigorous recruiting program to bring in the top investigators and the top research professionals in the space. And over the last year, we've also made a great deal of investment in harmonization and setting the bar much, much higher on operating with excellence across all of our clinics. That took the form of a more robust, what we call central structure of professionals in all of the critical functional areas, medically, scientifically, quality. We actually operate in regions where we have a regional structure with quality and compliance professionals who audit our facilities and our clinics and all of our processes with great attention to detail. And so that all speaks to the need to operate a unified standard of excellence. From a regulatory standpoint, I would tell you this process begins, just like much of our process begins, before a clinic is ever opened. We go through a deep investigation and discovery process of the regulatory nuances in the regions and countries, and sometimes even the specific locations in which they operate, to ensure that we understand that regulatory structure very, very deeply. And we build that into our regional process. We build it into, often the regulatory pieces play out sort of most notably in the study activation process. where you're working with different regulatory structures that have different pathways. Certainly with the EU CTR, that's pretty new on relatively speaking. That requires attention and focus in how we operate and interface with regulators and biopharma companies and our clinics alike. The last thing I would say is time is so very critical in drug development. And one of the things that we really focus on a lot at START is study activation timelines. And you don't achieve, and we run at 6 weeks of study activation in the US and 10 weeks of study activation timeline in the EU. 6 weeks is really against a backdrop of 6 to 10 months, and similar 10 weeks against 6 to 10 months in Europe. And so we've engineered the organization to be able to operate with harmonization and centralization in those processes. And so simply said, we cut no corners, the weight of responsibility too great. We're entrusted with patient care, being a resource to physicians, and then to the drug developers who are placing their asset in a human for the first time.
The next question, perhaps short, but I realize has a big answer behind it. What unique challenges and opportunities do early phase hematology trials present for sites like yours?
There are about 1.25 million new cases of hematology cancer per year. There are 1,000 drugs in the preclinical pipeline, and there are 4,000 active trials in hematology. Now, as you know, from an incidence rate standpoint, the 80-20 rule is what is salient here, in that 80% of cancers are in solid tumors. The infrastructure that we have for solid tumors is largely the same infrastructure that one needs for these hematology trials, but with some differences, and I could call them challenges. And one of which is, there are only a couple of thousand early phase oncology investigators in the whole world. It's a narrow universe of highly specialized expertise. When you cut those data even further, when you look at the number of investigators who are doing, 5 or more trials in early phase oncology per year, it thins out even faster. You're into the kind of the mid hundreds. When you look at the number of early phase investigators in hematology, it's a very small universe. So challenge one, I would say, is finding the investigators who are deeply experienced in the area, who have the capability, the experience, the understanding not only of hematology writ large, but also hematology drug development and early phase cancer. Fortunately for us, we have a deep network of investigators. We also are able to recruit with, I think, a level of precision and expedience that others may not be able to. But certainly something that we think a lot about, because building that hematology capability to address the patient need and to address all of the exciting assets that are in drug development top of mind. We have some very experienced investigators in the space. Dr. Andy Sachaki, who operates in our clinic that we call START Midwest in Grand Rapids, Michigan, Vanderbilt-trained, world-class early phase oncology heme researcher. Danny Murillo, who operates out of one of our Madrid clinics. Challenge number two, if we put it that way, there are some aspects of these protocols that from time to time either require hospitalization or have an aspect of the protocol that is hospital-based. In Europe, all of our clinics are in hospitals, so not really a challenge there. Where we operate out of clinics in the US, in oncology practice groups, we have hospital relationships where we're collaborating with them, and our investigators have privileges at those hospitals. But when, again, beginning with what a clinic looks like as we're discovering whether it's the right clinic, and given the attention and focus on hematology, we kind of build those things in, and it's part of our checklist, for lack of a better way of putting it, and what we look at in a potential new clinic.
Fantastic, thank you. What are the bottlenecks that you're most focused on removing to further reduce the bench to bedside timeline?
And again, it is about timeline compression while also enhancing scientific rigor. So if you can be really targeted in the preclinical setting, by having those PDX models and having all of those data associated with those PDX models, it makes it easier for the drug developers to find a very precise model for a very precise target for a very precise molecule. When we do that, part of the clock that's it's taking in our minds is how quickly can we do that and arm those drug developers with the right information, and then running those preclinical projects or trials with attention and focus on the timelines so that they can identify whether there's going to be a tumor response or not. What we glean from those preclinical trials is not only critical for the drug developers, but it's critical for us at start as an asset then moves into the clinic, because there are learnings associated with that molecule that we then are better informed about to run those trials when they enter the clinic and are going to enter humans for the very first time. And it speaks to the collaboration that occurs between our preclinical group and our group of investigators. And then with that collective understanding, we can then better advise the drug developers on the right way to construct the protocol, which we often do. We actually have protocol review meetings each week that are attended by all of our investigators, one in the US, one in Europe. And armed with those data, you can design a better protocol. One of the things that we do, and we did it 55 times in 2024, is enroll the very first patient or patients in a clinical trial. So if you can be more targeted in the preclinical setting, run those mouse trials with precision, find signal, glean data, enter the clinic, activate trials quickly, and then enroll patients well. And we enroll on average 9 patients per protocol per start site. And that's the long pole in the tent in drug development timelines, is just getting enough patients on those trials to prove out one's endpoints. And we outperform enrollment benchmark by about 3 times. So 9 patients per protocol per site versus an industry average of 3. So, and all of the while, these trials are being looked over and looked after by some of the finest investigators and preclinical scientists in the world.
Fantastic. Thank you for that answer, Nick. I hope this next question is not too philosophical, but how does START decide which assets to bring into its pipeline?
It's actually pretty straightforward, and it really just starts with attention and focus on our clinics and the patients and the physicians. We possess a lot of data that we roll up, and we aggregate about patient population in the clinics that we are in and the larger hospital or practice group that we serve. And so we know what that census looks like. We know what the incidence rates look like. And we know, therefore, what are the right trials to bring in. That's kind of point one. Point two, the way our model works is our investigators are, for the most part, the overwhelming majority of them are just full-time early phase oncology investigators. That's different than the conventional model, where an investigator is also typically delivering conventional care. And so our investigators are constantly in active conversations with the referring physicians. They attend tumor boards. They are alerting physicians of new trials that have come in that may be a fit for their patients. And so when you start with the clinic and the patients and the physicians, then I won't say it's easy, but it provides focus on then matching that with the drug developers' pipelines. And we have a very large client base. We possess a lot of data on where pipelines are in the industry, who is developing what. And then the goal is to match the needs in the clinics with the portfolios that are available. And we are often on a quarterly basis having conversations with the sponsors, the drug developers, about their upcoming portfolio and upcoming trials. And we're taking assessments of what protocols would be the right match for the various different clinics. And so obviously we spend a lot of time on that because if we didn't, we wouldn't be addressing, the first principle, which is patients and physicians.
Absolutely. Thank you. And now this next question, I think in part you've answered throughout the interview, but how start fostering scientific collaboration between academic, biotech, and pharma partners?
On one hand, we have like the ethos of a not-for-profit organization or a .org. We're so focused on this mission of hope through access and providing access to these clinical trials for patients who would have otherwise had doors closed on them. At the other end of the spectrum, speaking to things like location expansion and harmonization and process engineering and metrics, we operate like a corporation. And then in the middle of all of that, I would tell you it's a very vibrant academic community. Our investigators collectively have contributed 4,000 publications to the literature, increasingly. And so we facilitate a lot of academic collaboration amongst our investigators. So that's maybe on the academic point. And then another way to think about that academic point, for example, that PDX model library, we have 3,000 PDX tumor models. Those catalogs, those biorepositories exist in multiple of our clinics. And in Europe, for example, we are even in academic hospitals and make those models available to not only our investigators to do exciting basic research, but also to the broader community of researchers in those facilities so that they can publish and they can contribute to the literature and perhaps originate some exciting new discovery that benefits cancer science. As it pertains to how we collaborate with the biopharma companies, we are seeing so many trials and our investigators are so deeply entrenched in the drug development process and have the benefits of hindsight and have the benefits of pattern recognition that we're able to, and we build this right into our process, collaborate with the biopharma companies on helping them improve their protocol designs and make them more applicable to real world settings.
Fantastic. Thank you. It sounds like everyone's wearing multiple hats at the same time at any given
Indeed.
time.
Indeed. Our investigators are unbelievable people. I mean, when you think about what they do each day and taking care of patients in desperate situations on one hand, and also our intellectual giants in the field of cancer research on the other, it's pretty special to watch how they navigate those complexities.
Well, that brings me to the end of this episode. If you are enjoying this content, be sure to join free today to become a member of Drug Discovery World. Membership includes full access to the website, including regular news and exclusive content, a weekly e-newsletter, podcasts, vodcast, white papers, ebooks, and information from trusted third parties. Head to our website at www.ddw-online.com for more information. Thanks for listening.